A single black dad lived next to a gynecologist. Then one night she told him a shocking secret. The porch light is dim. The air smells like coming rain. A woman in expensive athleisure stands on the shared front steps of a Charlotte duplex, her voice low and venomous, controlled enough that the neighbors won't hear but sharp enough to cut. She's a doctor, successful, featured in magazines, the kind of woman who wears her status like armor, and she's looking at the man in the FedEx uniform like he's something she stepped in. "You had no right," she hisses. "You think you can ruin my career? You're nobody. You load trucks for a living." The single father stands there, weathered brown hands hanging at his sides, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. He doesn't respond, doesn't defend himself, just takes it. His 14-year-old daughter steps forward. Her voice is ice. "My dad's not pathetic. He's a better doctor than you'll ever be." The woman turns on the girl, laughing, mocking. "Your dad loads trucks." And that's when the father speaks. His voice is quiet, but it carries weight. "I'm a reproductive endocrinologist, or I was." Silence drops like a stone. "I developed the Abrams protocol. It's probably in the textbooks you used in medical school." Across the way, a neighbor pulls out their phone, searches. Their face changes. They hold up the screen, an article, a photo, a younger version of the man in scrubs standing beside his wife, holding an award. The doctor's face drains of color. Because the nobody she confessed her crimes to 3 weeks ago, the man she told about the patients she lied to, the embryos she knew would fail, the families she destroyed for profit, isn't who she thought he was. If you believe the people we underestimate are often the ones holding the truth we're most afraid to face, stay with this story. What happens next will show you why quiet strength is the most dangerous kind. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who regretted it? But to understand how a night shift worker and a celebrated physician ended up on that porch with everything between them shattered, we need to go back 8 months to the life Terrence Abrams built in the shadows and the moment it all started to crack. A single black dad lived next to a gynecologist. Then one night she told him a shocking secret. The porch light is dim. The air smells like coming rain. A woman in expensive athleisure stands on the shared front steps of a Charlotte duplex, her voice low and venomous, controlled enough that the neighbors won't hear but sharp enough to cut. She's a doctor, successful, featured in magazines, the kind of woman who wears her status like armor. And she's looking at the man in the FedEx uniform like he's something she stepped in. "You had no right," she hisses. "You think you can ruin my career. You're nobody. You load trucks for a living." The single father stands there, weathered brown hands hanging at his sides, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. He doesn't respond, doesn't defend himself, just takes it. His 14-year-old daughter steps forward. Her voice is ice. "My dad's not pathetic. He's a better doctor than you'll ever be." The woman turns on the girl, laughing, mocking. "Your dad loads trucks." And that's when the father speaks. His voice is quiet, but it carries weight. "I'm a reproductive endocrinologist, or I was." Silence drops like a stone. "I developed the Abrams protocol. It's probably in the textbooks you used in medical school." Across the way, a neighbor pulls out their phone, searches. Their face changes. They hold up the screen, an article, a photo, a younger version of the man in scrubs standing beside his wife, holding an award. The doctor's face drains of color. Because the nobody she confessed her crimes to 3 weeks ago, the man she told about the patients she lied to, the embryos she knew would fail, the families she destroyed for profit, isn't who she thought he was. If you believe the people we underestimate are often the ones holding the truth we're most afraid to face, stay with this story. What happens next will show you why quiet strength is the most dangerous kind. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who regretted it? But to understand how a night shift worker and a celebrated physician ended up on that porch with everything between them shattered, we need to go back 8 months to the life Terrence Abrams built in the shadows and the moment it all started to crack. Terry climbed the duplex steps at 2 in the morning, his FedEx uniform still smelling like diesel and cardboard. His shoulders ached, His back ached. Everything ached. Then he saw her. Dr. Elena Voss sat on the porch steps in a silk bathrobe, bare feet on the concrete, a wine bottle tipped beside her. Empty. Her face was streaked with mascara. Her hands shook. She was crying. Terry stopped. He'd lived next to this woman for 8 months and she'd never looked at him. Not really. Just past him. Through him. Like he was part of the building. But tonight she looked up, and her eyes met his. There was something raw in her face. Something desperate. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. She laughed. It came out broken. "No." Terry hesitated. He was exhausted. He wanted to go inside, check on Imani, fall into bed for 4 hours before the world demanded him again. But something in the woman's posture stopped him. The way her shoulders curved inward. The way her breathing hitched. He sat down on the steps. Not close. 3 feet of distance between them. "Do you want to talk about it?" Dr. Voss stared at him for a long moment. Then something in her crumbled. "You don't know me," she said. Her words slurred slightly. "You don't know anyone I know. You're just the guy next door." Terry said nothing. He just waited. And Dr. Elena Voss started talking. She told him about her clinic, the fertility treatments, the women who came to her desperate, broken, willing to try anything. She told him about the success rates she'd been reporting. 90%, 85%. Numbers that made her practice look like a miracle factory. Numbers that were lies. "I've been implanting embryos I know won't take," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Non-viable, wrong cell counts. But I tell them they have a chance. I tell them to try again. Another cycle. Another $10,000. Another round of hope I know I'm selling them for nothing." Terry's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. "I falsified the data," she continued, "for years. To keep the referrals coming. To keep the insurance companies paying. To keep my reputation intact." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I destroyed families. Bankrupted couples. They'd come in holding hands and leave 6 months later, filing for divorce because the stress broke them, and I knew the whole time it was never going to work." A plane roared overhead. The sound swallowed the silence between them. "Why?" Terry asked. His voice was low. "Because I couldn't afford to fail," Dr. Voss said. She gestured vaguely at her side of the duplex, at the luxury car in the driveway, at the life she'd built. "I needed to be the best. I needed to stay on top. And when the numbers started slipping, I just changed them." Terry's hands rested on his knees. His fingers curled inward. "There's a woman," Dr. Voss said. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "Former patient, 6 cycles. I knew after the second one it wasn't going to happen. Her eggs weren't viable. But I kept taking her money, kept telling her next time. She lost her marriage, lost her savings, and now she's threatening a lawsuit. She has documentation, records. She's going to expose everything." A car passed on the street. Its headlights swept across them and disappeared. "I'm terrified," Dr. Voss whispered. "Everything I built's going to burn, and I deserve it. I know I deserve it." She looked at Terry then. Really looked at him. "But you won't tell anyone," she said. It wasn't a question. "You don't know these people. You won't tell anyone. You're just the guy next door." Terry sat very still. Something cold had settled in his chest. Something old and familiar. He knew what it felt like to lose the chance at life. He knew what it cost when that chance was stolen. He knew what it meant when doctors stopped seeing patients as people and started seeing them as numbers on a balance sheet. "You should get some sleep," he said quietly. "Things might look different in the morning." Dr. Voss nodded. She stood unsteadily, gripping the railing. "Thank you for listening." She stumbled inside. Her door clicked shut. Terry sat alone on the porch. The night air was cool against his skin. The streetlights cast long shadows across the concrete. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. He thought about the women Dr. Voss had lied to, the families she'd broken, the hope she'd sold knowing it was empty. He thought about Jasmine, about the way she'd believed every patient deserved honesty, every family deserved truth. He thought about the mothers who'd trusted a doctor to help them, and the doctor who'd betrayed that trust for money. His hands trembled. He pressed them flat against his knees until they stopped. After an hour, he stood and went inside. The duplex was quiet. Imani's bedroom door was closed. He could hear her breathing, soft and steady. He lay down in his bed fully clothed, stared at the ceiling, listened to the hum of Dr. Voss's expensive espresso machine starting up through the wall. Sleep didn't come. His mind kept circling back to the confession, to the women, to the families destroyed. And he knew, with a certainty that made his chest ache, that he couldn't unhear what he'd just been told. 2 weeks passed. The confession sat in Terry's chest like a stone he couldn't dislodge. He went to work, loaded trucks, sorted packages, came home, made breakfast for Imani, helped her with homework, Wednesday night Scrabble, Sunday morning pancakes. The rhythm of their life continued like always, but everything had changed. He saw Dr. Voss through the duplex wall sometimes, heard her footsteps, her phone calls, the hum of her espresso machine. She didn't look at him when they passed on the porch. Neither of them acknowledged what had happened that night. It was easier that way. Then Imani came home from school on a Tuesday afternoon, and everything got worse. She burst through the door with her backpack still on, eyes bright, practically vibrating with excitement. Terry was at the kitchen table, halfway through a bowl of cereal before his shift. "Dad, Dad, you're not going to believe this." She dropped her backpack and pulled out a folder. Her hands shook as she opened it. "I got selected," she said, "for the mentorship program. The competitive one I told you about, where they pair students with professionals in their field." Terry's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. "They only picked 10 students from the whole district," Imani continued. She was talking fast, the way she did when she was too excited to breathe properly. "And I got in. And guess who I got paired with?" Terry's throat went dry. "Dr. Elena Voss." The room tilted. Just slightly. Just enough that Terry had to grip the edge of the table. "The gynecologist," Imani said. She pulled out her phone, showed him an article. Charlotte Magazine. Dr. Voss in a white coat, arms crossed, smiling. Top doctors under 50. "She's one of the best in the state, Dad. She runs a fertility clinic. She's helped hundreds of families, and I get to shadow her for 6 weeks." Terry couldn't speak. "I already looked her up," Imani said. She sat down across from him, her whole face glowing. "She went to Duke for medical school. She's published research. She speaks at conferences. Dad, this is exactly what I need. I can ask her about patient care, about building a practice, about what it's really like to be a woman in medicine." Terry set his spoon down. His hand was shaking. "That's great, baby," he managed, but his voice came out wrong. Flat, empty. Imani's smile flickered. They ate dinner that night in the small kitchen that smelled like the spaghetti Terry had made. Imani talked about the mentorship, about the questions she wanted to ask Dr. Voss, about how this could help her college applications. Terry nodded, said the right things, kept his face neutral, but inside he felt like he was drowning. After dinner, Imani loaded the dishwasher while Terry wiped down the counters. A plane roared overhead. The duplex walls were thin enough that he could hear Dr. Voss moving around next door. "Dad!" Terry looked up. Imani was watching him, her hands still in the soapy water. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said. "Just tired." "You've been quiet. Long shift last night." Imani dried her hands on a towel. She leaned against the counter, studying him with those sharp eyes that saw too much. "Do you think the mentorship is a good idea?" Terry's jaw tightened. He chose his words carefully. "I think you should learn from people who practice medicine with integrity." "What does that mean?" "It means—" Terry paused. "Sometimes people who look successful on the outside aren't who they seem." Imani frowned. "You think Dr. Voss isn't a good doctor?" "I didn't say that, but that's what you mean." Terry set the dishcloth down. He looked at his daughter, 14 years old, too smart for her own good, standing in their cramped kitchen with her mother's eyes and her mother's hunger to understand the world. "The most important thing a doctor can have isn't skill," he said quietly. "It's not reputation. It's not success rates or magazine features." "Then what is it?" "Honesty with their patients." The dishwasher hummed. Water gurgled through the pipes. Imani tilted her head. Dad, how do you know so much about what doctors should be? Terry froze. The question hung between them like smoke. Imani's eyes narrowed, not suspicious, just curious. Waiting. You always talk about medicine like... She paused, searching for the words. Like you know it, really know it, not just from watching TV or reading articles. You know things. Terry's mouth went dry. When I had that fever last year, Imani continued, you knew exactly what to look for. You checked my temperature and my breathing and my pupils, and you said it was just viral. Give it 48 hours. And you were right. The urgent care doctor said the exact same thing. She took a step closer. And when Mrs. Patterson down the street had chest pains, you told her to call 911 immediately. You didn't hesitate. You didn't Google it. You just knew. Terry's hands gripped the counter edge. Sometimes you use words I have to look up, Imani said. Medical words. And when I ask you what they mean, you explain them like they're obvious. Like they're just part of how you think. The refrigerator hummed. The thin wall between their duplex and Dr. Voss's seemed to press closer. Dad, Imani said softly, how do you know so much about what doctors should be? Terry looked at his daughter, at the girl he'd raised alone for 9 years, the girl who didn't remember her mother, the girl he'd protected by becoming invisible. He'd never told her, never explained. He'd buried that part of himself so deep, he'd almost convinced himself it didn't exist anymore. But sitting across from her now, seeing her wait for an answer, he realized something. He couldn't protect her by hiding the truth. Not anymore. Terry sat down across from his daughter. His hands rested flat on the kitchen table, palms down, like he was steadying himself against something invisible. I know about medicine, he said quietly, because I used to be a doctor. Imani went still. My name is Terrence Abrams. Dr. Terrence Abrams. I'm a reproductive endocrinologist. The words felt strange in his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. I went to medical school at Duke, he continued, trained at UNC Medical Center. I specialized in helping women who'd had multiple pregnancy losses, women who'd tried everything and kept losing babies. I developed a treatment protocol for certain autoimmune conditions that occurred during pregnancy. Imani's eyes were wide. She didn't interrupt. They called it the Abrams Protocol, Terry said. It became standard practice at major hospitals across the country. I saved lives, mothers and babies both, hundreds of families. He looked down at his hands. The same hands that had held scalpels and ultrasound wands now spent their nights loading boxes into trucks. I was good at it, he whispered. Really good. Then why, Imani started? Your mother, Terry said. The kitchen seemed to contract. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly. Her name was Jasmine. She was a nurse practitioner. We met during my residency. She was the smartest person I ever knew, and the kindest. Imani's breathing had changed. Shallow, careful. We had you, Terry said, and we wanted to give you a sibling. She got pregnant when you were 4. Everything was perfect. Normal ultrasounds. Normal blood work. She felt great. His voice cracked. Just slightly. She went into labor on a Tuesday morning. I was at the hospital already working. They called me down to the delivery floor. I walked in and she was smiling. Excited. Ready. Terry's fingers curled against the table. Halfway through the delivery, something went wrong. An amniotic embolism. It's rare. Catastrophic. Amniotic fluid enters the mother's bloodstream, causes massive clotting, shuts down the heart and lungs. There's almost no warning. Imani's hand moved to her mouth. She died in 4 minutes, Terry said. The baby died 2 minutes after that. A girl. Your sister. The refrigerator hummed. A plane roared overhead, rattling the windows. I was in the room, Terry whispered. I watched the monitors. I knew what was happening. I knew every stage of it. And I couldn't do anything. The team tried everything. I tried everything. But she was gone. Imani's eyes filled with tears. I had spent years saving other people's families, Terry said. Other people's wives, other people's babies, and I couldn't save my own. He looked up at his daughter, saw her trying not to cry. I stopped practicing, he said. Couldn't go back. couldn't hold a chart without seeing her face, couldn't walk into a delivery room without hearing the alarms. I had a breakdown, stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Your grandmother took care of you for almost a year while I was gone. I don't remember, Imani whispered. You were 5 when I came back, and when I did, I'd lost my medical license. Depression, failure to maintain competency, I didn't fight it. I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. I just wanted to keep you safe. Terry's voice steadied. So I took the FedEx job. Simple work, mindless. It let me be home with you. It let me disappear. Imani wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I rebuilt myself into someone smaller, Terry said. Someone who didn't have to carry the weight of other people's lives. Someone who could just exist. Silence filled the kitchen, heavy and complete. But you're still a doctor, Imani said. Her voice was thick. Not legally. But you still know. You still think like one. Terry nodded slowly. Imani stood, walked to the sink, turned on the faucet and splashed water on her face. When she turned back around, her eyes were red but clear. You were a real doctor, she said. I was. You know what real doctors are supposed to do. Terry's chest tightened. Imani crossed her arms. She looked so much like Jasmine in that moment it hurt. So what do? She asked. When you know someone's hurting people. The question landed like a fist. Terry stared at his daughter, 14 years old, standing in their cramped kitchen, asking the one question he'd been avoiding for 2 weeks. She didn't know about Dr. Voss's confession, didn't know about the women being lied to, the families being destroyed. But she knew enough. She knew her father had been silent when he should have spoken. She knew integrity mattered more than safety, and she was asking him to be the man he used to be. Terry opened his mouth, closed it. The weight of every excuse he'd built dissolved under her gaze. You do what's right, he said finally, even when it costs you everything. Imani nodded, like she'd known that's what he'd say all along. Terry looked at his daughter and realized something that made his hands go cold. She'd just handed him the answer he'd been running from since that night on the porch. Terry went to the public library on Tuesday morning. He sat at a computer terminal in the back corner where the light was dim and the only sound was the hum of old hard drives. He opened a browser, typed carefully, North Carolina Medical Board, contact, submit a concern. The form was simple, clinical, name optional, details required. Terry's fingers hovered over the keyboard. His work-roughened hands looked strange against the plastic keys, like they belonged to someone else. He didn't use Dr. Voss's name, didn't quote her confession word for word. He was too smart for that. Instead, he wrote about patterns, statistical impossibilities, success rates that didn't match industry standards for a clinic serving patients with recurrent loss. He suggested they audit billing records, cross-reference embryo viability reports with pregnancy outcomes. Look at the number of cycles per patient compared to clinical indicators. He wrote like a doctor, precise, methodical, pointing them exactly where they needed to look. Then he hit submit. The screen refreshed. Your concern has been received. A reference number appeared. Terry closed the browser, cleared the history, stood up. His legs felt unsteady. That night, after his shift, Terry sat on his bed with his old phone, the one he'd kept in a drawer for 8 years. The battery was dead. He plugged it in and waited. When it powered on, his old contacts loaded. Names he hadn't thought about in years. Colleagues, mentors, people from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. He scrolled until he found the one he needed, Dr. Patricia Simmons. She'd been a friend once, a colleague who understood what it meant to be a black physician navigating spaces that didn't always want them there. She'd checked on him after Jasmine died, called every week for months. He'd stopped answering, but her number was still in his phone. Terry drafted a text, deleted it, drafted another, deleted that too. Finally, he just called. It rang 4 times. He almost hung up. This is Dr. Simmons. Her voice hit him like a wave. Professional, warm, familiar. Dr. Simmons, Terry said. His voice came out rough. I have information about a fertility clinic, potential fraud. I wanted to make sure any investigation protects the patients first. Silence on the other end. Then, Terry? His throat closed. Terry, is that you? He could lie. Hang up. Pretend this call never happened. Yeah, he whispered. It's me. Oh my God. Her voice cracked. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm fine. I need your help. Anything. Tell me. They agreed to meet the next day. A coffee shop in uptown Charlotte, neutral territory, far from the duplex. Terry arrived early, sat in the back booth facing the door. His FedEx uniform felt too visible, too loud. He kept his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee that had gone cold. When Dr. Simmons walked in, she scanned the room like she was looking for the man she remembered. Her eyes passed over him once, twice, then stopped. She was in her 50s now, hair cut short and natural, silver at the temples. She wore a tailored blazer and carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who'd earned every inch of space she occupied. She walked to his booth, stopped, stared. Terry, he stood. Dr. Simmons. Patricia, she said. It's Patricia. She pulled him into a hug before he could protest. He stood stiff in her arms, unused to being touched, unused to being seen. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. Look at you, she whispered. Terry sat back down. She slid into the booth across from him. FedEx, she said. It wasn't a question. Night shift. 8 years now. Patricia's jaw tightened. She looked like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. Tell me about the clinic, she said instead. Terry told her everything, the porch, the confession, the women being lied to, the non-viable embryos, the falsified data, Imani's mentorship, his fear that his daughter would learn medicine from someone who treated patients like profit margins. Patricia listened without interrupting. Her face remained neutral, professional, but her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. I submitted an anonymous report to the medical board, Terry said, but I wanted to make sure someone was watching, someone who'd care about the patients more than the headlines. I'll handle it, Patricia said. I'll work with the board. Make sure they build a case that doesn't rely on your testimony alone. The clinic will be audited. If what you're saying is true, they'll find it. Terry nodded. Relief flooded through him. Patricia leaned forward. But I need to tell you something else. Terry waited. The hospital is launching a reproductive justice initiative, she said. Low-cost fertility care for underserved communities. Ethically transparent. Patient-centered. We're designing the protocols now. She paused. Her eyes held his. We need someone who understands the medicine and the barriers. Someone who knows what it means when the system fails people. Terry's breath caught. Would you consider consulting? Patricia asked. Even informally, just talk to us. Help us build something better. Terry stared at her, at this woman who remembered who he used to be and was offering him a door back. I don't have a license anymore, he said. I know, but you have knowledge, experience, and something most doctors don't have. You know what it costs when we get it wrong. The coffee shop buzzed with afternoon noise. Laptops clicking, espresso machines hissing, people living their ordinary lives. I'll think about it, Terry said. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Her palm was warm against his cold fingers. You're still a doctor, Terry, she said quietly. You just forgot for a while. She left him with her card and a promise. The medical board would move carefully, quietly. Dr. Voss wouldn't know what was coming until it was too late. Terry walked out of the coffee shop into the late afternoon sun. The city felt different, louder, brighter. He drove home, parked in front of the duplex, and sat in his car for a long time. Through Dr. Voss's window, he could see her moving around her living room, talking on the phone, laughing at something, living her life like nothing had changed. But something had changed. The machinery had started. Quiet, invisible. And Dr. Elena Voss had no idea that the man she dismissed as nobody had just set her world on fire. The investigators arrived at Dr. Voss's clinic on a Wednesday morning. 2 men in dark suits carrying leather briefcases. They showed identification at the front desk. North Carolina Medical Board. They asked to speak with Dr. Voss privately. Her receptionist called back to the exam rooms. Voice tight, nervous. Dr. Voss came out smiling. Professional, in control. But when the men explained they were conducting a routine audit of her practice, something shifted in her face. They requested patient files, billing records, embryo viability reports, success rate documentation for the past 5 years. Dr. Voss's smile stayed fixed. Of course, whatever they needed. She'd have her staff compile everything. But her hands shook when she signed the authorization forms. Over the next week, the investigators came back 3 times. They interviewed her nurses, her lab technicians, her billing coordinator. They sat in the conference room with boxes of files, cross-referencing numbers, making notes. Dr. Voss watched through the glass door, tried to work, tried to see patients, but her focus was gone. Someone had reported her. Someone knew. She ran through every conversation, every staff meeting, every patient interaction. Who could have figured it out? Who had access to the data? Then she remembered the porch, the wine, the confession, the neighbor, doctor. Voss sat in her car in the clinic parking lot that Friday afternoon, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel. Rain streaked the windshield. The heater blew hot air that smelled like burnt dust. Terry Abrams, the FedEx worker, the nobody. She'd told him everything that night, every detail, and he'd sat there listening with those tired eyes, saying nothing, judging nothing, or so she'd thought. Rage built in her chest, hot and sharp. He'd betrayed her, taken her vulnerability and weaponized it. Reported her to the medical board like some self-righteous crusader when he was just a man who loaded trucks for minimum wage. Dr. Voss drove home through the rain, parked in her driveway, sat there watching the duplex through the downpour. Through Terry's window, she could see movement, him and his daughter at the kitchen table, ordinary people living their ordinary lives, while her world burned down around her. The next 3 weeks were a slow-motion collapse. The investigators requested more files, more interviews. They brought in a statistician to review her success rates against industry benchmarks. The numbers didn't match. The patterns were impossible. Dr. Voss hired a lawyer, prepared statements, tried to control the narrative, but the evidence was damning because the evidence was real. She'd done everything they were accusing her of, and more. At home, she watched Terry through the walls, listened to his footsteps, his daughter's voice, the sound of their simple, intact life. She saw him leave for his night shifts in that worn FedEx uniform. Saw him come home in the early morning, shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Saw him sitting on the porch with his daughter on Sunday afternoons, talking, laughing. He looked so harmless, so small, but he destroyed her with a single phone call. Meanwhile, Imani's mentorship start date kept approaching. Terry had delayed it once, claiming a family emergency. The school counselor had been understanding. They'd pushed the start date back 2 weeks, but now that deadline was here. Imani had her folder ready, her questions prepared. She talked about it every night at dinner, eyes bright with excitement. Terry smiled, nodded, said the right things. But inside he was screaming. He couldn't let her go to that clinic. Couldn't let her spend 6 weeks learning from a woman who saw patients as profit margins. But if he refused now, Imani would ask why. And he'd have to explain. And the whole fragile structure of his new honesty with her would collapse under the weight of what he'd done. He checked his phone obsessively, waiting for word from Patricia, waiting for the audit to conclude, waiting for Dr. Voss's world to officially end so Imani's mentorship would be canceled by default. But the medical board moved slowly, carefully, building an airtight case, and time was running out. One evening, Terry came home from his shift to find a note on the kitchen table in Imani's handwriting. Dad, mentorship starts Monday, doctor. Voss's office called to confirm. I'm so excited I can't sleep. Love you. Monday. 3 days away. Terry's hands trembled as he set the note down. He looked through the thin wall toward Dr. Voss's side of the duplex, could hear her moving around, pacing, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. She knew. He was certain now. She'd figured out it was him, and she was waiting. The weekend passed like a held breath. Terry barely slept, barely ate. He went through the motions at work, loading trucks, sorting packages, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. On Sunday evening, he and Imani sat on the porch. She talked about her mentorship, about the questions she wanted to ask Dr. Voss, about maybe applying to medical school someday. Terry listened, smiled, felt his chest tighten with every word. Then headlights swept across the duplex. Dr. Voss's car pulling into the driveway. She got out, stood by her car door, looked directly at Terry. Her face was calm, cold, deliberate. She didn't go inside. She just stood there, watching him, Imani noticed. Is Dr. Voss okay? I don't know, Terry said quietly. Dr. Voss finally moved, but instead of going to her door, she walked toward the porch, toward them. Terry's pulse hammered. Imani stood. Hi, Dr. Voss. I'm so excited for tomorrow. Go inside, Imani, Terry said. His voice was level, firm. Imani looked at him, confused. Now, she hesitated, then saw something in his face that made her obey. She went inside. The screen door clicked shut behind her. Dr. Voss climbed the porch steps, stopped 3 feet away from Terry, close enough that he could smell the wine on her breath, see the mascara smudged under her eyes. You reported me, she said. It wasn't a question. Terry didn't answer. You sat on this porch, Dr. Voss continued, and you listened to me break down, and then you went to the medical board. Her voice was getting louder. Neighbors' lights were on. People could hear. Do you have any idea what you've done? She snapped. I could lose everything. My practice, my reputation, my entire career, because of you. Terry stood slowly. His brown hands hung at his sides, steady despite everything. His tired eyes met hers without flinching. You destroyed families for money, he said quietly. Someone had to stop you. Dr. Voss laughed. It came out sharp and ugly. Someone? She stepped closer. You're nobody. You load trucks. You're a night shift worker living in a duplex you can barely afford. And you think you have the right to judge me? Across the way, a neighbor stepped onto their porch, watching, listening. Dr. Voss's voice dropped to something venomous and controlled. You betrayed a confidence. You ruined my life. And tomorrow, when your daughter shows up at my clinic for her mentorship, I'm going to make sure she knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Behind the screen door, Imani appeared. She'd heard everything. And that's when everything changed. Imani pushed open the screen door and stepped onto the porch. Her braids swung as she moved. Her eyes locked on Dr. Voss. My dad's not pathetic, she said. Her voice was cold, clear. Nothing like the 14-year-old who'd been talking about her mentorship just hours before. Dr. Voss turned toward her, sneered. And who are you to? He didn't betray you, Imani interrupted. You told him you were destroying families for money. He reported you because he's a better doctor than you'll ever be. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Voss's face changed. The composure cracked. She looked at Imani like she'd been slapped. Your father, Dr. Voss said slowly, is a truck loader. He has no idea what it means to practice medicine, to build a career, to maintain standards in a field where one mistake can... Enough! Terry's voice cut through the air, quiet, but weighted. He stepped forward, placed himself between Dr. Voss and his daughter. You told me you lied to patients about their chances, Terry said. His brown hands hung steady at his sides. His tired eyes met hers without flinching. You told me you implanted embryos you knew wouldn't take. You told me you falsified success rates to keep your reputation intact, while families went bankrupt chasing hope you knew was a lie. Dr. Voss's mouth opened, closed. I spent 15 years of my life helping women carry babies to term, Terry continued. His voice deepened, steadied. The vocabulary shifted, precise, clinical, revealing something underneath. I'm not going to stay silent while you profit off their grief, and I'm definitely not letting my daughter learn medicine from someone who sees patients as billing opportunities. The porch light flickered. A plane roared overhead, rattling the duplex windows. Dr. Voss laughed. It came out bitter, mocking. You? She gestured at his FedEx uniform, at the worn fabric, the name tag, the existence of a man who sorted packages for minimum wage. You load trucks for a living. What do you know about medicine? Terry looked at her for a long moment. Imani stood beside him, her hand finding his. I'm a reproductive endocrinologist, Terry said quietly. Or I was. Dr. Voss's smile faltered. I developed the Abrams Protocol for autoimmune pregnancy management. It's probably in the textbooks you used in medical school. Silence dropped like a stone. Dr. Voss stared at him. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Across the street, the neighbor who'd been watering plants, an older man in a Carolina Panthers cap, pulled out his phone, typed something. His eyes went wide. He walked across the street, stopped at the edge of the porch, held up his phone. The screen showed an article. Charlotte Observer, 8 years old. Dr. Terrence Abrams receives March of Dimes Award for groundbreaking pregnancy loss research. There was a photo, Terry, younger in a white coat, standing beside a black woman with kind eyes and a brilliant smile, his arm around her waist. Both of them holding a plaque, both of them beaming. The neighbor's hand shook slightly as he held the phone higher. "You're him," the neighbor whispered. "You're that doctor, the one who saved my sister's pregnancy. 6 miscarriages and you figured out the antibody protocol. She has 3 kids now because of you." Dr. Voss grabbed the phone, stared at the screen, her face drained of all color. She scrolled, found more articles, medical journals, conference presentations, a whole career she'd never imagined because she'd never looked past the uniform. "You," she started. Terry took the phone from her hands, handed it back to the neighbor. "Thank you," he said quietly. Dr. Voss's breathing had changed, shallow, fast. "You let me tell you everything," she whispered. "You sat there and you listened and you knew. You knew exactly what I was doing wrong because you'd spent your entire career doing it right." Terry said nothing. "And you reported me." "Yes. You ruined me." Terry's jaw tightened. "You ruined yourself. I just made sure you couldn't ruin anyone else." Dr. Voss looked at Imani, at the girl who'd defended her father without hesitation, at the daughter who'd grown up not knowing her father was extraordinary. "Does she know?" Dr. Voss asked. Her voice cracked. "Does she know what you gave up? What you walked away from?" "She knows," Imani said. "He told me everything." Dr. Voss's face twisted. Rage and humiliation and something else. The dawning realization that the man she dismissed as nobody had been someone all along. She looked at Terry one last time, opened her mouth to say something, then stopped, because there was nothing left to say. She turned, walked to her door. Her hand fumbled with the keys. She went inside. The door slammed shut. The porch went quiet. The neighbor stood there, phone still in his hand, looking at Terry like he was seeing him for the first time. "I never knew," the neighbor said. 8 months you've lived next door and I never knew." Terry's arm went around Imani's shoulders, pulled her close. "It's okay," Terry said. The neighbor nodded slowly, walked back to his house, but before he went inside, he turned back. "Thank you," he called out, "for my sister, for all of it." Terry raised his hand. A small wave. Then he and Imani stood alone on the porch in the dim light, the sound of distant traffic and airplanes filling the silence between them. Imani leaned her head against her father's chest. "She's going to try to hurt you," Imani whispered. "Isn't she?" Terry looked at the closed door of Dr. Voss's half of the duplex, at the woman inside who just lost everything and now knew exactly who'd taken it from her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Probably." But for the first time in 8 years, Terry Abrams wasn't afraid of being seen. The story spread through the neighborhood like fire. By morning, 3 more neighbors had found the article. By afternoon, someone had posted it to the community Facebook group. By evening, everyone on the block knew that the quiet man in the FedEx uniform, who'd lived next door for 8 months, was Dr. Terrence Abrams. People stopped Terry on his way to work, asked if it was true, told him about sisters, cousins, friends who'd struggled with pregnancy loss, thanked him for work he'd done years ago that still echoed in their families. Mrs. Patterson from down the street brought him a casserole, said her niece had 3 healthy kids because of the Abrams protocol. Terry accepted the food, nodded, didn't know what to say. Inside the duplex, through the thin wall, he could hear Dr. Voss on the phone, her voice sharp, defensive, lawyer, defamation, slander. 2 weeks after the porch confrontation, the North Carolina Medical Board released its findings. Dr. Elena Voss's fertility clinic showed a pattern of statistical anomalies inconsistent with accepted medical standards. Success rates reported to insurance companies did not match patient outcomes. Embryo viability assessments appeared to have been systematically misrepresented. The board was suspending her license pending a full disciplinary review. The news picked it up. Local station, brief segment, fertility doctor under investigation for fraudulent practices. Former patients started coming forward. A woman named Sarah Chen, 6 cycles, $40,000. Dr. Voss had told her each time that the next round would work, that her embryos looked perfect, that she just needed to keep trying. Sarah had lost her marriage, her savings, and her hope before she finally stopped. A couple from Greensboro, similar story, bankruptcy, divorce, years of their lives chasing a possibility Dr. Voss knew was a lie. More voices joined. A pattern emerged. Women who'd been told to keep trying when any competent physician would have recommended stopping. Families destroyed by debt, hope weaponized for profit. The medical board's investigation expanded. Subpoenas, depositions, documentary evidence that couldn't be explained away. Dr. Voss hired a lawyer, issued a statement. The allegations were based on misunderstandings and a disgruntled neighbor with a personal vendetta. She'd never intentionally misled patients. Any statistical discrepancies were clerical errors. But the audit findings were damning. The numbers didn't lie. And the women who came forward had receipts, medical records, emails where Dr. Voss had encouraged them to continue treatment despite clear indicators they should stop. 3 weeks after the board's announcement, Dr. Voss's clinic closed. The sign came down. The office sat empty. Terry watched it happen from his window. Watched moving trucks pull up to her side of the duplex. Watched her load boxes into her luxury car, her face hidden behind sunglasses even though it was raining. She never looked at his side of the duplex, never acknowledged him, just packed her life into cardboard and left. No goodbye, no apology, just gone. The duplex felt different after that, quieter. The wall between the two halves seemed thicker, less oppressive. Terry could breathe in his own home without feeling like he was being watched through the plaster. One evening, a month after Dr. Voss left, Imani sat with Terry at the kitchen table. Homework spread out between them. She'd been quieter since the confrontation, more thoughtful. "What happens now?" she asked. Terry looked up from the form he'd been staring at for 20 minutes. Dr. Simmons's offer letter, program director for the Reproductive Justice Clinic, a path back to medicine he'd never thought he'd see. "I don't know," he said. Imani set down her pencil, looked at him with those sharp eyes that saw too much. "Dr. Simmons wants you to come back," she said. "Doesn't she? She offered me a consulting position if I pursue license reinstatement." "Are you going to do it?" Terry's fingers traced the edge of the letter. The hospital's letterhead. Dr. Patricia Simmons' signature at the bottom. An invitation back to a world he'd left behind. "I don't know if I can," he said quietly. "It's been 8 years. The medicine has changed. I've changed. And I'd have to go through evaluations, therapy, coursework. It would take months, maybe longer. So I have a job. I have stability. You have a chance to be who you were supposed to be," Imani said. Terry looked at his daughter, 14 years old, growing up so fast he could barely keep pace. "You think I should do it?" Imani reached across the table, put her hand on top of his. Her fingers were slim and strong, her skin warm against his calloused palm. "I think Mom would want you to," she said simply. The words landed soft but complete. Not a command, not a guilt trip. Just a truth offered without weight. Terry's throat tightened. He thought about Jasmine, about the way she'd believed medicine was about service, not status, about how she'd chosen a nurse practitioner track instead of medical school because she wanted to spend more time with patients and less time in boardrooms, about how she'd always said that the best doctors were the ones who remembered what it felt like to be powerless. "You're right," Terry whispered. Imani smiled, small, genuine. "I know." They sat together in the kitchen as the evening light faded through the window. The airport roared overhead. The duplex creaked and settled. Life continued its ordinary rhythm. But something had shifted. Some door Terry had kept locked for 8 years had cracked open, and light was seeping through. The next morning, Terry called Dr. Simmons. He told her yes. 2 days later, an envelope arrived. Formal offer letter. Program director position contingent on license reinstatement, therapy requirements, medical board evaluations, continuing education courses, a 12 to 18-month timeline. Terry sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of him. Imani stood behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder. He picked up a pen, signed his name at the bottom, Terrence Abrams, M.D. The title felt strange after so many years, like putting on a coat that used to fit perfectly, but now hung different on shoulders that had carried too much weight. But it still fit. Imani squeezed his shoulder, leaned down and kissed the top of his head. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Terry looked at the signature, at the path opening in front of him, at the chance to be something more than invisible. And for the first time in 8 years, he let himself believe it might be possible. The therapy session started in November. Once a week, Terry sat in a small office with soft lighting and a woman named Dr. Chen who asked him about Jasmine, about the delivery, about the year he lost, about the guilt he'd carried for 8 years like a stone in his chest. It was hard, harder than the medical board evaluations, harder than the coursework, but he showed up every week, and slowly the stone got lighter. The medical board reviewed his case in February. They required updated training, new protocols, new research, changes in the field he'd missed while loading trucks. Terry took online courses at night after his FedEx shifts, studied the way he used to, remembered what it felt like to learn. Dr. Simmons checked in every few weeks, brought him coffee, asked how he was doing, reminded him that the clinic was waiting. In May, the board scheduled his final evaluation. Terry walked into the conference room in a borrowed suit, his hands steady despite everything. 3 doctors sat across from him. They asked him about embryo transfer protocols, about informed consent, about how he'd handle a patient who'd had 5 failed cycles. Terry answered every question, clearly, precisely, the medical vocabulary coming back like muscle memory. One of the doctors, an older white woman with gray hair, leaned forward. "Dr. Abrams, you've been out of practice for 8 years. Why should we reinstate your license?" Terry looked at her, thought about the women Dr. Voss had lied to, about Imani asking what doctors are supposed to do, about Jasmine, who believed medicine was about service. "Because the patients deserve better," he said quietly, "and I'm ready to give it." 3 weeks later, the letter arrived. License reinstated, effective immediately. Dr. Simmons came to the duplex personally to deliver it. She hugged Terry so hard his ribs hurt. Imani stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, smiling wider than Terry had seen in years. The Jasmine Abrams Center for Reproductive Justice opened in June. Terry started part-time, 3 days a week. The other days, he still worked at FedEx. He wasn't ready to let go of the stability completely. Not yet. The clinic was small, clean, bright, located in a neighborhood where the patients who needed it could reach it. The waiting room had comfortable chairs and children's books, and a sign that listed services in English and Spanish. Terry's first patient was a black woman named Monica, 32, 3 miscarriages, no insurance. Terrified, Terry sat with her for an hour, explained the Abrams protocol in language she could understand, walked her through every step, answered every question. When she cried, he handed her tissues and waited. "You're really going to help me," she whispered. "I'm going to try," Terry said. "And I promise I'll be honest with you every step of the way." Monica came back every week. The protocol worked. By September, she was 12 weeks pregnant and stable. Terry stood in the exam room after she left, looking at the ultrasound image still on the screen, a tiny heartbeat flickering like a promise. He'd forgotten what this felt like, the weight of it, the privilege. Imani started volunteering on Saturdays. She shadowed Terry, watched him with patience, asked questions about differential diagnoses and treatment plans. She was 15 now, growing up fast, already talking about pre-med programs. Terry taught her the way Jasmine would have wanted, with patience, with honesty, with the understanding that medicine was about seeing people, not just treating conditions. One afternoon, a resident asked Terry about his time away from medicine, why he'd left, what brought him back. Terry kept his answer simple. "I lost someone. It took me a long time to find my way through the grief, but my daughter reminded me what matters." The resident nodded, didn't push. Later, Dr. Simmons pulled Terry aside, told him that Dr. Voss was practicing again. Different state, probationary license, smaller clinic, diminished. "Does that bother you?" Dr. Simmons asked. Terry thought about the woman who'd dismissed him as nobody, who'd seen him as too small to matter. "No," he said. She has to live with what she did. That's enough. The anniversary of Jasmine's death fell on a Tuesday in October. Terry took the day off, both jobs. He and Imani drove to the hospital in the early afternoon. The autumn sun warmed through the windshield. The memorial garden was quiet. Tucked behind the main building, trees just starting to turn gold and red. Stone benches, a small fountain, plaques honoring donors and loved ones. And there, near the center, a new plaque. Polished bronze, fresh. The Jasmine Abrams Center for Reproductive Justice. Imani read it slowly. Her fingers traced the letters of her mother's name. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Would she be proud? Imani whispered. Terry put his arm around his daughter, pulled her close. Your mother believed every life mattered equally, he said. She believed every patient deserved truth and dignity. She believed medicine was about serving the people everyone else overlooks. He paused, looked at the plaque, at his wife's name carved in bronze. Carrying that forward is the only way I know to honor her. Imani leaned her head against his chest. I wish I remembered her. She's in everything you do, Terry said. Every question you ask. Every time you stand up for what's right. That's her. That's all her. They sat together on the bench facing the plaque. The fountain murmured. Leaves rustled overhead. The hospital hummed with life behind them. Patients being helped. Babies being born. Families being built. Imani took Terry's hand. Her grip was strong, certain. Thank you for telling the truth, she said. About Dr. Voss, about Mom, about everything. Terry squeezed her hand. Thank you for asking the right question. They sat in silence as the sun moved lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden. Father and daughter, doctor and future doctor. Two people who'd learned that integrity mattered more than invisibility. That sometimes the hardest kind of courage was choosing to do what was right when no one expected you to matter. That the people we underestimate often hold the truth we're most afraid to face. And that true character isn't revealed in moments of strength, but in what we do when someone places their darkest truth in our hands and assumes we're too small to make a difference. Terry had been small, invisible, nobody, but he'd mattered anyway. And that, he thought as he sat with his daughter in the garden, dedicated to his wife, was enough.